Hi, welcome to the Property Show. I'm Jayashree Kurup. I'm editor MBTV. I have with me Sharad Mittal. He's CEO of Motilal Oswal Real Estate. And Motilal Oswal is clearly banking on the real estate excellence, excellence being the operative word here. It launches an 800 crore fund. We decided to talk to Sharad and find out what he thinks about the Indian real estate market and what gives confidence to raise an 800 crore fund now. Thanks, Sharad, for joining us.
Thank you, Jayashree, for having me. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Sharad, first of all, talk about the timing. Why do you think this is the right time to launch a 800 crore
See, Jayashree, actually, if you see residential real estate market has gone through fairly long dry patch. It's been 8 years that the property prices have been stagnated. Uh, and that's largely happened because there is multiple regulatory changes that has taken place for better. There has also been ILFS collapse, which led to the liquidity issue in the real estate. So since 2016, and there has been a series of events, and last one was the pandemic that took place. Uh, Two reasons why we believe this is the right time to do a real estate fund. Uh, One, we are seeing the green shoots in the sector. Last 4 months, the sales have been excellent. Largely, sales have been restricted to projects which are completed or near completed, or developers which give confidence to the home buyer. We think that will continue. Second primary reason from an investing rational perspective, there is a paucity of liquidity in the real estate market, and it continues because the entire financing arm of the real estate, which would mean, say, private banks, PSU banks, NBFCs, and private equity, in last 2 years have struggled to generate. Specifically, I would say the NBFCs, which were the primary source of money between 2013 to 18, have kind of taken a backseat. Uh, PSU banks have also been fairly slow over a period of last 3 to 5 years. And in the private banks also, I would say some of the mid-sized banks have kind of taken a step back for various reasons. So at one end, we are seeing the green shoots in the sector. The sector requires 60 to 80,000 crore of construction finance on per annum basis. On the other hand, the number of players who can provide that credit has shrunk. From that perspective, the amount is very small. We are an opportunistic fund. We believe there will be a great time. I would like to highlight here is that this is our fifth fund. Our previous four funds have focused more on early stage investing, which is land acquisition and approval stage, wherein this fund is going to focus on more construction, where we believe there is a gap in availability of credit.
Okay. And currently, I think that is where the industry is struggling. Rather than acquisition of land, it seems to be just getting the construction of the projects completed, right?
Yeah. I think as an industry, and I'm speaking on behalf of the developers as well and rest of the stakeholders, the key uh, focus should be delivery of the project and sales, rather than adding new capacity or launching too many new projects. There is a fair bit of debt. Last 4 months have been excellent in terms of site visits and conversion of sales, largely driven by the low interest rate. If it continues for 12 to 18 more months, I think it will give a great recovery path to the residential real estate. So from that perspective, we believe there is a large opportunity to do construction finance.
Sharath, look at the real estate landscape and tell us, in your view, what percentage of developers can actually attract the kind of funds that you're raising? If you have raised, chances are there will be others who can raise funds, but what percentage of developers have got their balance sheets in place, their business processes in place to attract these funds?
It's a very difficult question. India, one of the key problem is that just too many players. People give a number of more than 50,000 developers across India. The opportunity size is not so large. These many developers came into the business because there were no entry barriers. Now, once the regulator has come into the place since May 2017, there's an accountability towards the rest of the stakeholders and primarily towards the consumer. My sense is that consolidation is something which is already underway, and this is the one-way street. Uh, we look at very differently. I cannot really put a percentage because there are so many developers. We look at very differently. We have identified partners in each of the markets, which will be around 15 to 20 developers in each of these markets. So that makes a universe of close to 100 developers for us in top 7 cities, going up to 150. So we typically like to work I would also like to add, Jayashree, is that because in our previous fund in last 6 years, we have done 85 projects across 32 developers. So we have our partners which are in place with whom we have done repeat transactions at the early stage. Large part of our fund will flow in to work with similar kind of developers or same developers.
And has the quality of the projects or the kind of structure of the projects changed, even with the same developers?
No, so only difference here is that, see, this business, the key thing is to find the right partner.
Right.
Once you have a meeting of mind, you have got what a right partner, then you need to scale the business with him. The key difference here in that all previous funds were coming at a land acquisition stage. This will come at a construction stage. From that perspective, it will be at a later stage of the project, but our focus has been to do investing in mid-income housing. We don't do low-cost housing, we don't do luxury. Across the 85 projects that we have done, the average selling price is close to 5,200 rupees. So we continue to focus on IT cities, mid-income housing with large developers focusing on now construction stage.
A lot of corporate developers, like the Mahindras, the Tatas, these are names which have a brand value associated with them, not necessarily with real estate. They've all entered the real estate market. There are joint ventures. They are picking up projects. Will these also be part of your on your horizon?
Yeah, so I think I will first let's address why there are so many corporate developers. Not only that, we have Bharti, TVS, so on and so forth who are coming. It's a great sign. It shows it's a sign that the sector is getting matured. These corporate developers see an opportunity. Eventually, real estate is the largest consumer product in our country.
Yeah.
This is the largest purchase an individual does in his lifetime. And one of the key challenge in last 6 years have been trust deficit.
Yeah.
So if you put both the things together, one, it's a large opportunity. Second, trust deficit is the biggest problem as a vis-a-vis consumer and the developer. These brands coming into this business bridges that challenge, and I believe we would love to work with some of these large developers, branded developers, large corporates, and we are also in past has worked with some of them.
Right. What makes a real estate brand? Something that you can invest in, that can attract your investment. What are those elements that craft this brand?
There could be multiple things. It operates at two levels. First level is the sponsor, developer, his corporate balance sheet. The second is at the end of the project. A combination of both makes a brand or the trust. So you can have the best of the developers. If the underlying project is not making money, it will be challenging for everyone involved. You can have the most profitable project, but with a developer who does not have the corporate governance and balance sheet, will not be able to pull it off. So I think now real estate has reached a point wherein you need to have a combination of both. A developer who follows corporate governance, who has a healthy balance sheet, and who's consumer focused, doing a project which is profitable.
Okay. And what are the other things that matter? For instance, location, the market segmentation and all that. Does that matter?
So that's from strategy to strategy for people. Both the things you can divide into like 10 each. So at a developer level, you can look at his track record not only vis-a-vis projects, but vis-a-vis his lenders, consumer, employees. You can look at his borrowing versus the cash flow that is generating. So one analysis can be done at the entity level. You also need to look at how's been the promoter's behavior in all through. Then you come at the project. Then one has to do segmentation at the project. What's the location? What's the size of the project? One of the things that we have stayed away is doing very large projects which are say 3 million, 4 million square feet. They would take more than 15 years to get completed. One will also has to see the segment that it is operating in. Is it low cost housing? It is mid-income housing, or it is luxury? What has worked best for us is the mid-income housing. The low cost housing, there is fair bit of demand, but at that price point, we believe the margins are very thin. And even if one of the variables goes wrong, the margins evaporate. Luxury doesn't work for us because the sales is fairly slow. The demand is so. I think it's a combination of all of it. It'll be difficult to find absolutely ideal transaction which ticks all the box, and that's where we have to take a calculative call on what are the combinations which will work best.
But you fund at the project level, right?
Yes,
Even
we
though you
fund
have
at the project level.
not
Yes.
at developer level at all.
No, we do only project SPV level investments.
Now, if a developer has, say, 5 projects going, or a developer has 2 projects going, what in your view is the completion capability of each? Can both be similar? Like there are developers who have multiple projects, there are developers who have fewer projects. Which one would be more?
No, so I think it will be difficult to really generalize on basis of this, but I would say it depends on the developer's ability to deliver, which is a function of his balance sheet
Yeah,
and his organizational strength.
yeah,
Organizational strength could also mean in terms of his ability to sell and construct.
right.
Uh, I have seen so many developers who have done 2 projects. I have not been able to deliver. Uh, and I've seen developers who have done 20, 30 projects at a given time, but they have the orientation and the bandwidth, both at the balance sheet and the organization to deliver these projects.
Would you check that then? Do
Of
they have
course.
technology? Do they have financial closure of each project?
Absolutely, absolutely. The health of the organization needs to be checked at multiple points, not only at the balance sheet, but also what kind of organization bandwidth they have been able to build. Their ability to sell. One of the things that we have started looking very closely is there could be great developers making great projects,
Yeah.
but the way the market is stacked up, one needs to have orientation of sale, uh, ability to attract the consumer is something that is extremely important.
Yeah. When you look at a developer in multiple cities, if a developer, you have been funding a developer, let's assume developer A, funding them in, say, the Gurgaon market, they move into the Yamuna Expressway market, which has new traction. How would you assess that project vis-a-vis this project which you have done before?
So, like we were discussing before just the show started, we have been a conservative lot. We like to take precautions. Markets was also of such a nature that one has to take all the precautions which are in place. We typically avoid looking at projects or developer who are moving out of their core markets or home markets. There are developers especially in southern market, who could be predominantly a Bangalore developer, but if they are going to Hyderabad, we'll be probably cautious looking at that Hyderabad project.
Okay. You feel that developers are best in their own territories?
Real estate is a very local subject, and it's still some time away where a brand extension can take place. But if I'm looking at a commercial property, we really don't do too much commercial property, large IT offices. There, if a developer is moving, their consumer moves along with them. Their consumer in those cases are these corporates or the companies. They move along with them. I'm not really sure about the brand extension of a city A developer to the city B. And the way the entire regulatory framework is structured in India, a developer A can be great in city 1, might not be great in the city 2, where the legal framework and the regulatory framework could be new to him.
Yeah, yeah. And we've seen that in many, many cases.
Yes.
How have the changes in policy, SEBI policy, government policy, given you the confidence to launch a fund now?
I think if you really look at it, I'm looking more at the last 7-8 years, the way it has played out. Let me just go a little bit more back. If you really see, the residential real estate saw a massive bull run in India from 2001 to till 2008. It was at the back of IT cities coming into being like Pune, Hyderabad, Bangalore, Noida, and Chennai, where the migration was taking place. Then 2013 is when the property prices peaked. And then we had a regulator in 2017. You look at any other asset class, you look at capital markets, say started in 1978, till the time the regulator was not strengthened till 1994, you had all kind of things happening in the capital markets as well. Once you have a regulator being put into the place, will ensure that the consumer rights are protected, rest of the stakeholders get information on time, and there is a level playing field, it would lead to a scale. real estate is a very fragmented asset class. So like we said, there is so many players. It might take longer, but directionally, I have no doubt in my mind that the sector will get organized. On the demand side, there is no two doubts that the demand is only going to sequentially go up as there is more prosperity, more per capita income, and migration takes place. I think this combination of both these two things would mean that we will have long-term structural growth in residential real estate. As far as short-term policies are concerned, this particular government, who's in their second term now, have been very focused on affordable housing or the mid-income housing. They have given a number of benefits, and then there are state-specific benefits which have come, especially say in Maharashtra in last 6-8 months. There have been multiple benefits which have been put in. But I am. You cannot build a investing case or a business case basis on policies, government policies. They can go out of fashion. They go out of vogue. And what is more important is structural. So there is a structural change which is taking place. From that perspective, I see a long-term growth in real estate.
Real estate regulator, if you look at SEBI has a complete control over that entire segment. But when you look at RERA is still struggling between IBC and consumer court, and RERA is struggling to find its place. You think that is a deterrent?
So like I said, Shri, SEBI was strengthened in 1994. We are in 2021.
Yeah.
It has taken these many years for the entire financial service of the capital markets to get organized, to get disciplined, and consumer protection. Bulk of the investments in capital markets now happen through mutual fund.
Yes.
Most of the IPOs are regulated, companies are accountable, so is the entire investing fraternity. The entire capital markets were not as fragmented as the real estate is.
Yeah.
It has come only in May 2017. 2-3 things that we have to note here. Real estate is a state subject. So is RERA.
Yeah.
It's fragmented. There is just too many consumer. Also, it came at a point where there is serious challenges that the residential real estate is facing. So there is a lot of baggage. Once that baggage is cleared off, and then you have a clean slate to have a runway. So my sense is a regulator take controls or gets mature, especially in democracies, over a period of time. And it's not going to happen overnight. Are things better than what they were pre-RERA? Definitely. I can tell you so many examples. Now consumer has a place to go and at least seek for some justice. There is an obligation at the end of the developers to launch projects only once they have all approvals in place. They have an obligation to submit information to regulator on a regular basis. So I would say we are far away from a perfect scenario, but are we better off what we were there pre-RERA? Definitely. I think these are some steps which have really helped the industry.
What about corruption? It was one of the biggest things that pulled back this industry. In your view, has that sorted itself out? Is that a deterrent for you in any way?
Real estate, each project requires approval. The way the regulations are structured, regulations change. Within a city like Bombay, it's like 10 cities rolled into one. So there are 10 different kind of regulation. When you have such large interface with the administration, there is bound to be some challenges. Are they improving? I would say slowly and gradually. But one thing that I have seen is because so there are two ends of it where there can be challenges. And I'm talking as an investor right now. One at the time of approvals, second at the time of sales. At the time of sale, the kind of projects that we operate in, which is largely mid-income, the cash part of that segment of it is kind of gone. Your consumer have now become more mid-income housing where the large part of the money comes through mortgages. As far as the early stage and the corruption around it, I think it will take time, but things have improved. I would say if I look at sequentially over a period of last, say 20 years, I would say there is fair bit of predictability in the entire process. There used to be a time when there was opaqueness around approvals. There could have been favoritism in various markets. Two plots which are adjoining to each other can have very different FSI. Those kind of anomalies has been taken out. So I think there is a level playing field. By and large, there is a predictability. Can there be more efficiency in terms of approval, in terms of timeline and process? I think that is something that would be worry me more than some of the other things that you mentioned.
Absolutely. How has COVID impacted this market? In your view, was it an opportunity? Because the residential home has suddenly acquired a new meaning, right? Is it
Yeah.
an opportunity or is it something that was a deterrent?
So actually, when the COVID hit, and in when the lockdown happened, because there was no parallels to be drawn, everybody uh, painted a worst case scenario, a really pessimist scenario, uh, assuming, because it's a fear of unknown. You don't know what you are getting in, how you're going to come out of it.
Yeah.
People thought that it could lead to massive job losses, it could lead to salary cuts, and it could also derail the economy of the country. As we started having unlock from say June, July, my sense is four things have happened during the COVID period, which has given a flip to the entire residential real estate market. First is the interest rate. Mortgage rates were between 8.5 pre-COVID, and now they are firmly between 6.5 and 7%. 1.5-2% drop is a large drop. It really improves the affordability of the consumer. The second thing that has happened, and that I see, that's a human behavior that I see. Everybody has a sense of deal making. Anybody who comes to me feels that ये अब अच्छा time है घर खरीदने के लिए. Property prices have bottomed. I'll get a good deal because there were so many fence sitter, and I see a lot of people buying in for their consumption, and they've been waiting and they believe that this is a good time to get a deal. And developers are not disappointing them. It's very heartening to see that the developers, consumers, when they are coming in, they are not letting them go. They're closing their transaction. Third thing, which I feel impact of lockdown at two levels. One, there are a lot of offices which are still operating from home and probably will continue for some more time from home. And maybe 5-day working, 6-day working is still some time away. Probably people will start with 2 to 3 days and probably gradually build it up. I think there is a practical need which has arisen. I know a lot of people where husband and wife both working, 2 kids, both doing school, and everybody is on their laptops and whole day. So there is a practical need of having a slightly larger home, or a practical need of a house which they can design their way. Because some bit of work from home will continue for at least next couple of years is my view. The second, which is more at an emotional level, is, and this is my thesis when I speak to people, family unit, which could be parents, could be immediate family of kids and wife or husband, have never ever spent so much of time together at one go.
Right.
3-6 month locked in and together. Some of the more important things in life, which could be a house, kids' education, somebody's marriage, have got discussed so much more.
That's right.
I know of some of my friends who have been discussing, kids' education is something, is also being discussed so much more about what are the kids going to do after 2 years, parents' health, and also what has happened is, because there was a fear of unknown during the COVID, house gives you a sense of a security. That if nothing else happens, I have a house of my own where I can live. So I think COVID has played at multiple levels, and combination of all of it is resulting into these robust sales that we have seen in last 4 months.
And COVID has had another collateral benefit. The smaller cities have seen a lot of uptick, right?
Yeah.
If I went from staying in Gurgaon to say Jaipur, I would rather get my own place in Jaipur and keep an option for myself.
Yeah, so that's something that has happened. My personal sense here is that organization would not go full work from home. Right. So some of the employees who have gone to their hometown or to the smaller cities probably will have to come back because there's going to be definitely some weeks or some days in the week which will be working from office. So I think from that perspective, I would say this was a short opportunity. But from a long term, I think if an employee was based in Gurgaon and during lockdown, he has gone back to say his hometown in Jaipur, my sense is the organization will expect them to come back to Gurgaon, maybe not all 5-6 days to office, but definitely be around.
Okay. So the opportunity still is in the big cities rather than
Yes,
moving to the
yes,
one.
yes,
Will
yes.
organizations move to tier 1, tier 2? Some parts of organizations, you see that happening?
I think largely it will be driven. So ITS companies occupies almost 60% plus office space. They are the primary reasons why these IT companies have grown so large and the migration is taking place. It will all play out how this whole work from home plays out. We are still in the middle of it. I would like to give myself 6 to 12 months more before really coming to a conclusion that this is the way forward. Uh, and if the organization believes that the efficiencies of the employees are within the acceptable limits, they might go to tier 2 towns to attract more talent. But I think the office part of it still needs to be played out.
Okay. And once that plays out, only will you know.
Then only we come to know how the opportunities landscape changes in some of these tier 2 towns.
Uh, the projects which are stuck in the market, there are
Yeah.
a very large amount, a number of projects. Do you think that picking up these projects, if a developer of good stature picks up one of these projects, you would still be invested in funding that project?
So, Jayashree, we have seen length and breadth of projects, which in this definition of being stuck, uh, it looks great on paper,
Yeah.
but once you get into the detailing of it, it's very difficult to execute. There are multiple stakeholders which get involved.
Yeah.
One of the things I would like to put here, on one hand, we are seeing recovery in residential real estate. We are seeing sales happening, but not everybody is beneficiary of these sales. It's only the projects which are near completed or completed. Their consumer is not bothered who's the developer. It is whether A category or C category. But if he's buying anything under construction, he is very cautious that he buys it from a developer where there he can have a trust factor. Some of these stuck projects requires larger resolution.
Yeah.
Because there are third-party rights in terms of consumers being created. There are vendors there. There are existing lender. There could be landowners and developers. For us, it has not been really a easy ride evaluating some of these projects. But some of the last mile projects where there is a financial requirement of existing lender not able to put the additional money to complete the project, that we see us as an opportunity, but not really stuck turnaround stories.
Okay. If there's a body of consumers and there's a developer who hasn't completed, in your view, I mean, this I'm asking as an advice to the consumers, is it better to go with that developer, help him raise the funds, put a little bit of your own and complete, rather than try and move it away and find another developer and complete the project?
So, Jashri, it has to be seen case to case.
Yeah.
What are the reasons which has led to the project being stuck? A lot of the project gets stuck because of the lack of liquidity.
Right.
Then one has to really go deeper into it. What kind of money is required to get it completed? How much is the unsold inventory? Is the current developer is a going concern to really finish those projects? My sense is most of the cases, the developer would not be the going concern. His ability to raise additional money or to do additional sale would be greatly hampered. That's why his projects have got into a situation like this. In those situations, the consumers will be better off to really roping in a new face or a new developer who can really raise that capital and complete the project.
That's a great. I'm going to take up some of the questions. There are a lot of questions. People have liked the discussion. Okay, a lot of people.
Thank you.
Like the discussion. There's somebody called Kishore Lalwani who says in Mumbai city, 50% commercial is vacant. Staff are working from home. Will that bring down prices as demand is dwindling? Actually, this will prices come down? This we need to set it to rest once and for all.
Yeah, so I think I would like to address both the things separately. When he's saying prices will come down, he means, I guess, for residential. Uh, there is a concept which is price correction. There is a concept which is time correction.
Yes.
Price correction is if I could have bought something 8 years back at 50,000 or say 10,000 rupees a square feet. Today, am I able to buy it at cheaper cost? People are focused on that.
Mm.
What people also need to focus is more time correction.
Yeah.
Property prices have been stagnated for 8 years. At an inflation or an opportunity cost of 7-8% also, it's a deep correction which has taken place. We also need to understand that in real estate, unlike capital markets, where the information is freely available, also both the buyer and seller can do a trade at the click of a button. Real estate corrections are slow and painful. It gets stagnated because the seller is not ready to come at a price which the market is accepted. So if the property prices have been stagnated for 8 years, there's a deep correction. Also, one of the key drivers in real estate is the mortgage rates. We are at a 16-year low of mortgage rate.
Yeah.
If there is anything, let me tell you, this is absolute bottom of prices.
Yeah.
And there could be micro markets within Bombay, say Bandra or say Lower Parel, and where there is more supply, but by and large, property prices have bottomed. They might remain here, but I don't see them cracking on price basis further going down.
Right. In fact, if at all, it should be the kind of thing that the government has done, that they've dropped stamp duty registration and so on, and eased.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Another one, how are developers or projects selected for a deal? Do they need to clear existing dues before they go for a new funding? Is that how it
No, so
works?
we need to. There are multiple levels. The one is, like I said, at the entity level, we need to see a developer. How healthy is his balance sheet? What all projects he is doing? How he's dealt with his previous creditors? Is he overdue with any of them? How has been his sales? How has been his cash flow? There are a lot of factors that plays at the entity level. Then it comes to the project level. Where is the project? How is going to be demand there? What segment that it operates in? Is there a healthy margin in the project if the approvals or the sales gets delayed? So it's not a very simple answer. It's a fairly long and complicated process.
Absolutely. After all, it is a lot of money, right?
Yes, and it's a third party money. We raise it from investors, so we do it in fiduciary capacity. So we have to be even more cautious while doing such transactions.
I have another question from Kishore Lalwani. There is overvaluation of projects for purposes of financing, which inflates the prices by 25% minimum. How can that be controlled? Do you agree?
No, I think that's not the case.
Okay. I think we are more or less on that. Thank you so much, Sharath. It's always a pleasure talking to you because you're so candid with your answers. You don't beat around the bush or things like that. And this is the time when we feel that people need to, knowing finance is no longer an option. Everyone needs to understand finance.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Jayashree. Thank you. Great interaction.